Welcome, my political friends of the interwebs. I ran across this article today that just literally had blood shooting out of my eyes. It really did. The article was by the AFP. Now, I have no clue what the AFP is. I know what the AP is, which is, of course, the Associated Pinheads. But I don't know what the AFP is. Maybe it's the Associated Federation of Pinheads. No idea. Anyway, this article was written by a guy named Tim Witcher. Clearly a liberal. Now, how do I know this? Well, okay, listen. The title of the article was is United Nations, or UN, calls for billionaires tax to help world's poor. Okay, well, first and foremost, let me say right out of the gate that I believe in my heart that the United Nations is literally the biggest threat to liberty on the planet. Okay, let me repeat that. The United Nations is the biggest threat to liberty on the planet. And that includes liberty for the people that live in the United States, who are American citizens. You know, now, all right, why do I say that? Well, first of all, let's just assume that Tim Witcher here is a UN nut hugger, because I believe that to be true. Okay, but let's just assume that is the truth. So why the headline? UN calls for billionaires tax to help world's poor. Simple. It's a divide and conquer. It's a class warfare thing. It really is. It's a title that is designed to divide us into camps. So you got billionaires and you got the rest of us. Now understand this. Billionaires are literally a very, very, very small group of people. Now, for example, there's an estimated 425 billionaires in the United States. Now, think about that. Roughly half of what my graduating high school class was. Okay? There's 315 billionaires in the Asian Pacific region, 310 in Europe, and 90 in other North and South American countries, and 86 in Africa and the Middle East. Okay? So we're talking about a pretty small group of people. All right. So it's easy to demonize those people. Oh, they're the evil billionaires. You know, if we could only get money from them, the world's poor would be so much better off. Well, let me say this about the world's poor. Okay, because I don't want anybody to get the idea that I don't care about the world's poor. You know, the best thing that you could do for the world's poor is stop feeding the bears. Let me repeat that. Stop feeding the bears. Big kudos for anybody that has a clue what I just said. Okay, so let me go on further. And when you start reading this article, and by the way, I will have a link to this article. I encourage everybody to read it. When you start reading this article, it really does shed some light on the real agenda of the United Nations. The real agenda of the United Nations is to control the world and take all the money. You control all the money. It's all about the money with the United Nations. And before I get to the money trail, let me say that, you know, what was it, Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations? The whole concept of having this League of Nations or United Nations really, listen, it wasn't about helping the poor. It wasn't about global greenism, environmentalism, carbon emissions. The whole concept was to give the world's leaders a way to resolve their differences without going to war. Simple. Literally simple. You have a dispute with your neighbor, you go to the United Nations, and you have supposedly nonpartisan groups of other leaders who all kind of mitigate the situation. That was the original intent. Somehow, liberalism has taken over, you know, which has a tendency to do. It's like a cancer, you know, but it's like a cancer that you can catch. Somebody coughs liberalism, and 10 people get cancer, literally, you know, and it's unfortunate, but that's the way it works. So let's get back to the money trail. Here's the thing, okay? If you read this article, you will see. All right, well, they divide the people, okay, against evil billionaires who apparently aren't paying their share. And they start talking about how governments had pledged money for the poor people on the globe, and they have reneged on a lot of that. Well, of course, a lot of people pledge things during good times, and then when bad times hit, charity starts at home, and sometimes a perfect example is Ted Turner. I don't know if you guys remember it. There was a time when Ted Turner had pledged $1 billion to the United Nations. Well, then his AOL Time Warner stock took a shit. And when it did, he lost a lot of money, and all of a sudden, giving away $1 billion didn't make any sense to him. Okay, so he goes back. And by the way, Ted Turner, one of the biggest supporters of the United Nations, liberal wackadoo. If you ever get a chance, watch some interviews with this guy. Crazy as a shithouse rat. Completely understandable that he's a liberal, because you pretty much have to be crazy as a shithouse rat to be a liberal. So anyway, he goes back to the United Nations, and he basically says, "Look, fellas, can we do this a little differently?" And I just, and they cut him a break. They cut him because he's a big supporter of theirs anyway. So anyway, they rescheduled some kind of payment thing. I'm not sure how it worked out. I don't think, to be honest with you, that he ever actually gave $1 billion to the United Nations like he had pledged to do. But I don't know. Maybe he did. I don't think so, though. So anyway, when you start looking at this article, you start dissecting this article, you start to realize that it's all about money. It's all about raising money. It's all about taxing. It's all about what they can tax, how they can tax, and the benefits of taxing. By the way, here's the thing about liberals, okay? They really do believe that there's a lot of benefits to taxing. It's called several different ways to skin a cat. Obama loves that. Okay, and let me show you. And I'm not going to read the article for you, but let me get down towards the bottom of it. And by the way, it talks about that this would appeal to people like Warren Buffett, who clearly suffers from some kind of dementia. Because Warren Buffett's all about saying, hey, the billionaires aren't paying their share, and that's really what this billionaires aren't paying their share. But when it comes down to it, when you start reading especially towards the end of the article, it does talk about how, for example, this is what they say. Let me read this little part to you. It says the UN expert said that taxes make economic sense. Okay, which, by the way, is contrary to reality, but that's okay. He said the taxes make economic sense as they stimulate the green economy and mitigate financial market instability. Now, let me touch on this green economy thing, because this is a theme that liberals have used over and over again. They know that green energy on the surface will not take off. At least not now. It's not ready for prime time. It's just not. They know that solar panels, windmills, and geothermal and whatnot are not ready for prime time, and they know that the American people want something that works, and they want something that is affordable. Okay, and that basically is fossil fuels. Bottom line, that is fossil fuels. So the greenies have never been able to figure out how to get around. Well, I shouldn't say never. The greenies have figured out how to get around that, and that is you tax the bejeebus. This is where it comes back to the United Nations expert saying that taxes make sense. You tax the bejeebus out of the fossil fuels, okay, under the guise of it being a carbon tax. You tax it to where it's too expensive. For example, in the United States, the latest and greatest from the EPA was to create standards that were so ridiculous that it became too cost prohibitive for power plants to operate using coal. That's what they did. So, and taxes come in many different forms. People need to understand that taxes come in many different forms. But the thing about the green nonsense that comes out of the United Nations is they have the most to gain, because in their little scam, bamboozlement, right? They're the benefactors the beneficiaries of all the green taxes, of all the carbon taxes, to save the world. It's funny when you see people talking about saving the planet and saving the world and all this stuff, but yet they have so much to gain financially. It's got to be pretty sweet to be them. It's got to be pretty sweet to be them. But I read through this bullshit. I see through this bullshit. And it's exactly what it is. It's liberalism 101 bullshit. It's all about taxing and controlling. They want to control what you do and tax what you do, so, the revenue comes to them and they have control. It's simple and it's easy as that. Really, that's it in a nutshell. You know, this whole green economy, this whole saving the poor people and all this stuff around the world, it's all about money. Now, how do I know that about the UN? Well, listen, the United Nations has a track record. It isn't like I'm just throwing this, spewing this shit out my ass. Remember back to when Saddam Hussein was still the president of Iraq, and it was after the first Gulf War when we kicked him out of Kuwait. There was the whole oil for food program because there were sanctions on it. He had to be sanctioned. Listen, at that time at least, he had weapons of mass destruction. He was using it on his own people. We know this is a fact. He killed tens and tens of thousands of people, if not millions of people. And so we had to do something. So we sanctioned the hell out of him, but there were a lot of people who said, well, the United Nations in general, well, this is horrible for the children are suffering. Always be careful when liberals bring up children, because you grab your wallet and run. Grab your wallet, grab the Bill of Rights, and run like hell, because that's what they're coming after. They're coming after your rights, your liberty, and your money. Okay? So they concocted this oil for food program, and it was ran by the United Nations. And you want to talk about an absolute fleecing. It was unbelievable. People should have went to prison for this. It was unbelievable. The United Nations officials, their family members, their friends, all of them were on the take. Every one of them. It was all about padding their pockets. And the United Nations really did prove themselves to be a corrupt organization at that point. Unfortunately, nobody bothered to do the right thing, which is to boot them out of the United States. Boot them out of the United States. That's the one thing I would say. In all honesty, because it's a culture of corruption and liberalism, I think that we would be better off in the United States to leave the UN and kick them out. Let them go to Geneva or wherever the hell they want to go to, but kick them out. Because everything that they do at the United Nations is designed to steal your liberty. Steal your liberty. Around the globe. Listen, around the globe, this isn't just me in the United States, although that's my home. That's where my heart's at. This is a way to control people around the globe. A bunch of corrupt, inept. Listen, any organization that puts despots in charge of human rights committees, which is kind of it's just, come on. Anyway, listen, there's no sense in me dragging this out any longer, but I will tell you that this is an article worth reading. But when you read this article, okay, you need to start looking at what they're trying to tax, why they're trying to tax. It starts out, with the UN calls for billionaires tax to help world's poor, but then they start justifying other taxes like carbon taxes and whatnot. Now, the last time I checked, not only billionaires were not the people that just flew, because I'll tell you what, that's you look what China's flat out told them to kiss their ass. This whole concoction of carbon taxes, this whole. Now, you know what? I could keep going and going and going and going. I think y'all get the picture. But read this article. Read this article. You read it with an open mind, and just look at the United Nations for what they are. They're an evil, corrupt organization with two things on their mind: pocketing a shit ton of your money and stealing your liberties. I'm going to be doing another thing on the United Nations regarding their small arms treaty nonsense that they're trying to suck us into. Because, there's nothing like disarming people to just put a cherry on top of their control sundae. Anyway, everybody take care. See ya!